The laws that forbid the carrying of arms are laws of such a nature they disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants. They serve rather to encourage than to prevent homicides. For an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man. These are the wise words of Thomas Jefferson. Welcome to the Second Amendment Defender channel, where we talk about the philosophical importance of the Second Amendment and how it protects our other inalienable rights granted to us through the Constitution and Bill of Rights. On this channel, we discuss the state of politics as it relates to the Second Amendment. We do gun reviews. We talk about gun safety tips and discussions, our ownership responsibilities, and also just the pure enjoyment of firearms, hunting, and competition shooting. And I ask you, whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, to please like and subscribe so we can share our collectively do our part to arm each other with education and understanding of all sides versus rhetoric and hyperbole. Because remember, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. Again, wise words of Albert Einstein. So stay tuned as we talk about the basics of the Second Amendment.
Things were gone. I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for
Welcome
freedom.
back. Today we're going to talk briefly about the Second Amendment and the philosophy behind its purpose and its existence. Why does the Second Amendment matter so much to us? Regardless of whether or not you're a gun lover, an enthusiast, whether you have a passive interest, whether you're a hunter, or even if you have no interest whatsoever now or any time in the future. Even if you are philosophically against guns or weapons, it is still very important for you to understand and care about the Second Amendment. The purpose of the Second Amendment has been at the heart of a debate now for well over 100 years. So I'm going to quote it. Quote, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Breaking this down a little further and taking a minute to understand both sides of that debate. On one side, they clearly state that it lays out a well-regulated militia. The argument here is that they feel the framers clearly set up a government that was a republic of sovereign states. Initially, it was a compromise between the Federalists, who were framers who wanted and argued for a federal government, versus the Anti-Federalists, who were framers who favored a more state-controlled form of government. The Anti-Federalists felt that it was necessary for each state to have a militia to prevent tyranny from an oppressive federal government. That's their definition, again, on that one side of what a well-regulated militia is. Today, we know this as our National Guard. One thing we know for sure is that the framers had an overriding and universal intent, which was to form a government that was of the people, by the people, and for the people. They were intent on allowing the people to be the source of power, not the government. They were also focused on being absolutely sure that Congress had enumerated powers. Article 1, Section 8 of our Constitution has a whole laundry list of these enumerated powers. Basically, enumerated powers are telling Congress where your powers end. Now, this is important to understand and keep in context as to the timing and the intent of the Second Amendment and the definition of a well-regulated militia. This is the other side of the argument. You see, the framers were concerned and knew well that absolute power corrupts absolute. So all throughout the formation of the Constitution and this new government, they were sure to set up a series of checks and balances, all to prevent too much concentration of power without proper oversight. Noah Webster wrote, "Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom in Europe." He used this as an as a way to urge the passing of the Constitution. George Mason told his Virginia delegates that the monarchy in Britain had the goal to, quote, disarm the people, as that was the best and most effectual way to enslave them, end quote. We, in our free society, with a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people, we are civil rulers, not the other way around. You see, a guy named Tench Coxe, who was a friend of James Madison, stated that it was clearly the main objective of the Second Amendment as to provide a check on the national government's standing army. So let's take a minute. Let's assume that the far left had their way and that the Second Amendment was completely abolished and guns were made illegal. So honest, law-abiding people who may have a gun for home or property or personal protection, well, we'd have to turn those guns in or be faced with possible jail time. Now, I ask you to stop and just use common sense here for a second and put your mind in the mind of a criminal. Do you really care if something's legal or illegal? I mean, remember, you're a criminal. Isn't that why you're a criminal? Isn't that the definition of a criminal? You break laws. Now, since you don't care about the law, do you really think that you're not going to be able to go buy a gun or obtain one simply because they're illegal? Aren't drugs illegal right now? How do they buy those? Where do they buy them? I thought they're illegal. However, now you as that criminal know that no house you break into, car you hijack, store you go to, school you decide to go and try and shoot up, will you be met with any sort of instant defense? Again, I ask you, put your mind in the mind of a criminal. You simply don't care about the law. So I'm going to ask you with that, in what way does adding more gun laws, or God forbid, trying to remove the Second Amendment altogether, how does that help protect people? Again, Thomas Jefferson said these words, "They that can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety, well, they deserve neither liberty nor safety." Every right-minded individual on both sides of the aisle feel that it's a tragedy when someone goes on a shooting spree and kills innocent people. There's not one rational or sane person that would disagree with that statement. However, we cannot and we must not sacrifice a person's liberties and our freedoms that exist for a grander purpose because of some misguided ideas of added and temporary safety. As stated, a criminal is a criminal because they don't care about laws. Let me ask you this question. When was the last time you heard about someone going to a gun range and trying to rob people or go shoot it up? When's the last time you heard about someone walking into an NRA convention and trying to shoot it up? Or go to a police station and again try to shoot it up? They may seem like stupid or sarcastic questions, but they're not. I'm intending to demonstrate the obvious. They may be a criminal, but for the most part, they have a natural desire to live. So they know that walking into any one of those places, they're likely to be met with a very strong defense, and most likely you're going to come out on the short end of the stick. We often hear that the Second Amendment protects all the others. So with that in mind, let's not be so arrogant to assume that the past doesn't apply to us today. As the statement goes, those who forget history or don't know history are doomed to repeat it. So, for a minute, let's just assume right now that it's the 1930s and 40s in Germany. You kind of get the sense that things are changing. Now, it's good if you're a white Aryan person. It's not so good if you're Jewish or anything other than white Aryan. There's nothing too concrete yet. But you can tell that little changes are occurring, and you're worried about the direction things are headed. Then the Third Reich decides that it would be easier for them to consolidate power if they disarmed all of the enemies of their regime. That was to include anyone that was not of the Nazi Party and anyone not white Aryan. Why? Pretty simple. They can't fight back. There's no means for them to protect themselves, their home, their property, or persons, or family. So the Nazis then confiscated all Jewish property and valuables and they use that to help fund their war effort and propagate their hatred. They knew that they'd have no resistance. In order to get that to happen, they needed public support. First, you need to demonize someone, so they demonized the Jewish people and make them sound like they're the cause of all the problems. And that you had to fear the Jews, not the government. That sort of division got people whipped into a frenzy and fight amongst themselves. And ultimately, that helped support the power and consolidation of power. And that eliminated any sort of checks and balances. Doesn't that sound a little familiar? Don't worry, we're the government. Hey, we're here to help. Then we have our Fourth Amendment right. The Fourth Amendment states this, quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, their houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized." So, if we remove the Second Amendment or water it down to the point of irrelevance, how do you suggest that we are able to uphold or defend our Fourth Amendment rights? The right of the people to keep and bear arms. What does this mean? What does keep and bear mean? It means the right to own and use a gun. The Second Amendment is unambiguous in its stating, quote, "shall not be infringed," end quote. The Fourth Amendment clearly states, quote, "shall not be violated," end quote. In other words, remember those enumerated powers mentioned a little bit ago. This is a statement to that federal government that these are not up for debate. These rights are inalienable. Let's rewind 200 years ago. Our forefathers and the framers, well, they didn't and possibly couldn't have imagined fully automatic weapons in an era of muskets and horseback. So, along the way, we've made concessions, and we've done this with hopes that violence would come down. Now, if you've never bought a gun before, I encourage you to go through the process and to experience the background check process. If you haven't done that and you haven't bought a gun or gone through the process, how can you cast an educated opinion on that process? Is it better for us to go through those complete background and safety checks and make sure that the individual buying the gun is of sound mind? Some would argue, of course it is, and I'd probably be one of those. But what cost do we have to pay to reach that safety? Remember, quote, "shall not be infringed," end quote. Well, we just introduced an infringement. Is that better and justifiable? Again, probably. But to what, now that we've introduced that, now we're on that slippery slope. And I guess you see the problem here. It's a constant balance between public safety and those inalienable rights. If we get to the point where we are having to protect or defend our inalienable rights, you know that inferences can and will be drawn to that time in the past in the 30s and 40s in Germany. If we have to protect our rights, well, then we've lost sight of what enumerated powers means, and that we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, I believe strongly that the reason people may be against guns is simply because they've never used one. My dad always said this: I could put a loaded gun on the counter and come back 50 years from now, and it'll still be there and loaded. The meaning behind his words are, I guess, our obligation of safety and responsibility as the owner of that gun. If we use a channel like this to help spread the word in a civil and non-divisive manner, we can help teach people the importance of the Second Amendment, not demonize those who disagree with us. We don't need to do that. The law is on our side. Remember, shall not be infringed. We must demonstrate our competence, our sanity, and our decency through tolerance. I'm not under some misguided belief that we're going to turn some far-left socialist gun hater into a Second Amendment defender. We don't need to do that. But we can try and find common ground for those willing to do it. Together, let's find a way to protect our families, our schools, our rights, and each other from all enemies, as it said, foreign and domestic. So in conclusion, I ask you, actually I'm urging you, to join me on this mission and each do our part to protect our rights. Please like and subscribe this channel and share it with others so we can reach solutions through education. We'll be doing many videos like this on basic civic courses, which unfortunately is all too often forgotten in schools. We'll be doing it on our history as a nation and as a people. We're going to do gun reviews and gun safety tips, accessories, the state of politics as it relates to the Second Amendment, and any other suggestions we get from you, our subscribers. It's also expected that we keep our comments and discussions civil and purposeful. Please join me and become a Second Amendment defender. Like and subscribe to this channel. Have a good day, and may God bless you, your family, and our group.
Where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the